we're really talking about defense mechanisms. That was a title lined out. So the goal is to kind of look at some of those early my Skype just froze. I apologize, my Skype just froze. Okay, so we'll try that again. Okay, so again, I'm going to talk about defense mechanisms, and we're going to kind of look at our early developmental people. I'm going to go over some Erikson, I'm going to go over some Piaget, and we're going to pick up Freud, and then of course those defense mechanisms do belong to Freud. Okay, so then I'm going to share my screen. I think I'm sharing. I'm going to start with Erikson. I hear all the time, oh my gosh, can you please tell me a shortcut to remember Erikson? Nope. Sorry. Just got to know him. That's all I can tell you. So Erikson is one of our early developmental people. And literally what he looked at was how we grew. Erikson is the only one that had 8 stages. Can everybody see my screen? Am I sharing? I think I'm not.
No.
No, you're not sharing it.
Thank you much. Thank you. I think it pulled up there. Okay, so here we go. See, am I sharing now?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so Erikson was he was my psychosocial. Okay, he was a bit Freudian. He did believe that some of these things were very much unconscious. And I can learn all of these is what I hear all the time. What I suggest that you do is whatever day you pick Erikson, pick it up, and we're going to then go back and go over it again and again and again. I never recommend that you study more than an hour and a half at a time. Research shows that most of us, after that amount of time, our attention span is just gone. My younger ones especially, but even the people who are my age, really sometimes our attention span is just not that long. So when you're learning Erikson, if you're a visual learner, what I want you to do is make sure that you print this out or write the cards or do whatever it takes that you can see it every day. If you're an auditory learner, either go back and listen to this videotape as often as you'd like, or speak it into your phone. Someplace you can hear it every single day. So what I want you to do is always break it up into parts and pieces. So when you're learning Erikson for that day, just learn Erikson. Spend an hour in the morning learning him, and then as you go through the day, repeat it. Talk it to yourself, look at your notes, and listen to your phone, however you have made it a part of you. We all learn differently. Those color-coded note cards freak me out. Like, I can't do that. And yellow and blue, and like, not me. I'm an auditory processor. But you need to learn the way that you learn the best. Okay, so in the morning, you're going to learn Erikson. You're going to talk about it all day long. And at the end of the day, you're going to go back and pick up Erikson again. And the next day, you're going to get up and remember Erikson. And you're going to add on another piece with Erikson. So as you go along, then you're going to have Erikson and then Piaget. And that's going to be your day 2. You're going to keep going over in the morning all day long. Put it to use. You all know someone that's in this age frame. Okay? So it's not as if this is something that doesn't apply to you. Tell all your friends, by the way, did you know that you're in generativity? Okay, so I mean, those are things that will make it part of you. And really, you have to just know it. So they do build on each other. Oral and anal, the first 2 stages, are the same as Freud's, right? Okay, because remember, Erikson was a little bit Freudian. So oral and anal, trust versus mistrust, autonomy versus shame. So you're going to remember, same thing with the babies. In my autonomy versus shame, I just think of the big boy underwear. I've tried to get potty trained and I'm so excited and I've got my big boy underwear on and then I have an accident in my big boy underwear, right? So that's my autonomy versus shame. So Freud would say oral, you have issues with things in your mouth. And of course, then my second one would be my autonomy versus shame, right? Okay, I'm trying to make sure everybody's muted. Okay. So then, my second stage, 3 to 5, that's my initiative versus guilt. I kind of say that's the only time that the kids really want to help you out. They think it's so much fun to help. They make a huge mess, but it's hilarious, right? Mommy, I help. And the dirty dishes and the clean dishes are mixed up. The you're not sure, they've emptied your purse looking for something. I help, Mommy. Sometimes you've got an older child and they're trying to bring the baby to you. So that's that initiative. They're willing to grow up and they're trying to find their purpose. So I think those three, if you can focus on those three, the rest of the I's that seem so hard are really not that hard. Okay? So someone said it was a blank screen. I'm going to reshare. Okay. Okay. So then, if you are then in my 15 to my 15, I'm sorry, 5 to 13, that's inferiority versus industry. That is what you are good at. Remember when you were in first and second grade, remember who the fastest runner in the classroom was? Okay. Remember who was the one kid who was able to beat everybody else? All of those things, that's how you had developed your industry, what you're good at. Okay. I was the best reader in the class. Hello. However, I also I sat in the back of the room because of my last name, and I had difficulty seeing the board. So while I was a really good reader, when she called me to read off the board from my seat, I could not. That's when I got glasses. But I remember that, okay, because I felt inferior. So what we know in those years is that's where you're really kind of developing your competency. And one of the things I really think is important is I work with a lot of families and a kid who is doing poorly in school and they pull him out of sports. Okay. Erickson would say, no, we all need some place to feel good. And I think of the industry as what you are doing, right? In your country, in your town, in your city, what is your industry? What are you known for? So if that helps you remember what you're good at, it's really important for kids to know at that age what they're good at. And not everybody's the fastest runner, right? I'll be honest with you. So I went to like a mostly white school and I was the black kid and I was really tall. So everybody assumed I was a great athlete. No. So that was not my industry. But however, I did find my industry. I wasn't the fastest runner, but I really did enjoy reading. Okay. So then once I know my competency, I know kind of what I'm good at, then between 13 and 21, I develop my identity. So you'll see a question, a kid who is 13 years old and she's begins having new friends and she is isolating herself or she's changed her clothing style. Okay, that's an Erickson question. If there's no sign of drug abuse and no sign of sexual abuse in the STEM, the thing is she's just figuring out who she is. Remember 8th grade, 13, all you wanted to do is dress like everybody else. Oh my gosh, Mom, everybody's got those jeans. Okay. It was Gloria Van Herstenberg, Gloria, whatever the jeans were back in the day. That was what my age was, right? I wanted those because everybody had those jeans. So Vanderbilt. Thank you, Gloria Vanderbilt. Yes, thank you. I had to have my jeans because all my friends had them. Okay, so that's really was that age, and it was really cool. Remember in middle school, my girls especially call up your girls and like, what are you gonna wear today? And we'd all wear like the same color, get our nails done the same color, because it was really cool, right? However, as we grew up, if you're 21 and you're hanging out at the bar with your same friends, is it cool that you're dressed alike? Probably not. Okay. So then identity is who you are. During those ages, you learn who you are, you learn what you like, your sexual orientation becomes very clear. So all of those things happen in that age. Fidelity, means that, I'm sorry, competency means that you know who you are. Fidelity means you are true to yourself. Okay, that's what you learn between 13 and this is who I am. Okay, so you know while you might have been closeted when you were earlier, by the 21, you're like, hey, look at me. This is me. I like girls. I like boys. This is me. So once I know who I am, then I can fall in love. Okay, if I don't know who I am or who I'm attracted to, then I can't know who to love. So Erickson said that 21 to 39, of course, that was my intimacy versus isolation. He said that you needed to fall in loves, loves a couple of times maybe, to figure out what love was like. And if you never found love, then you would be in isolation. Now, you can get stuck in an Erickson stage. So you might see a question about a client who she's 62, and she spent her entire life in her business, and she never found that right person. So she's coming to therapy, and the question, the answer is that never developed. She was never able to develop that intimacy versus isolation stage. Okay, so it's important to know the ages, but also know what happens in the stages, because you'll get a question where the ages don't match up. Okay, what they're wanting to know is, do you know what is supposed to develop in that stage? And then, of course, my generativity versus stagnation, that's my age. If you're in my age or your professors are, I have some colleagues that are stagnated. I have some colleagues that have not changed their syllabi for the last 20 years. Okay. So then what I'm looking for is, making sure that I know for the question, the test at least, that they're either going on or they're stuck. You're going to look for something about generativity is giving back, leaving a mark for generations, whether it's your own generations or future generations. You're leaving a mark. You're not done. You're still growing. So that's what the question is going to look like. If you're stagnating, you are done. You are, you haven't changed your syllabus. I've got colleagues who are just waiting to retire. They got 2 more years in, and they show up every day, but they're not putting in a whole lot of effort. They're just waiting to retire. Okay. And then, so at that age, I'm supposed to really look at where we're at and leaving a legacy. And then that last stage, of course, is integrity versus despair. So then if I don't live my life the way that I wanted to, then at the end of the day, I'm going to look back in despair. Okay. And again, when you're looking for those questions, the key and the stems, you're going to look for that. She's 75 and she always wanted to be a school teacher and it never happened. So you're going to acknowledge the fact that she's in despair. Okay. I'm not sure my 75-year-old wants to go back to school and become a teacher for kindergartners, but I need to acknowledge her despair. So really, it's a matter of knowing those. And, I wish there was a shortcut. I do, but it's not just knowing, yes, the ages are important. Yes, they are. Also, however, knowing what happens in each stage is just as important. Okay, so that is my Erickson. He's the only one with 8 stages. He's the only one, and there are 8 letters in his name. If you have Erickson's, right? There's 8 letters there. Okay, so he is one of he's my psychosocial. You'll see a lot about developmental crisis, identity crisis. If you didn't pass through those stages like you're supposed to, it would be a crisis. So those are the keys that you're looking for when it comes to Erickson. Okay. Now my Piaget guy, okay, Piaget is my one who is my cognitive development. Okay, what he said is our schema, our brain, that's how our schema developed. Okay, so schema, and again, you have to know the order of the stages: SPCF, sensory motor, preoperational, concrete, and formal. And what I hear all the time is there were no Piaget questions on my test. I can promise you that is not true. Many times you'll get a question about a 5-year-old whose parents are getting a divorce, and the mother brings her into therapy because she's very upset. According to Piaget, or what stage would she be in of cognitive development? That's egocentrism. She thinks it's her fault. It may never say the word Piaget. It may not ever say the word preoperational, but that's a developmental task that happens in Erickson stages. I'm sorry, in Piaget stages. So don't blow these off, okay? Because these are really important. And again, like, oh my gosh, I never see those. Yes, you do. I promise you, you do. Okay. Sensory motor, of course, is birth to 2. that is when they are learning to see the world, right? Their senses, they're walking, they're talking, they're trying to make movements around the world. And every time they put stuff in their mouth, right? Because those 5 senses, that's how they see the world. The goal of that stage, of course, is that you will develop object permanence. That by the time the child is 7 months, that if the ball is missing, they will go back and look for it. Prior to that, remember that peekaboo thing? They didn't see you. You were just gone. Bye. Okay. So then, also that stage is if you had little ones or you have still had little ones, it's really fun to throw things off the high chair or throw things off the table. Because now I know they still exist and mom will pick them up. It's hilarious. Look, mom. You keep doing it over and over again. They think it's great because they know they still exist. Prior to that, they didn't think they even existed. That pre-operational stage, of course, that is 2 to 7. My 2 to 7-year-olds, that is when they believe in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy, all those great things, right? Okay, so they are the ones who are very, again, egocentrism is what develops in that stage. That is when they really think it's all about me. So, your 2 and 3-year-olds and you've gone to a friend's house and they didn't come in with the toy, but they want to leave with the toy and they're saying mine, mine, mine. Because, yeah, it's mine, right? it's mine. They're not capable of understanding that anybody else has any feelings or it's all about them, which is great when you're between 2 and 7. If you're 27, that's called narcissism, okay? So, but 2 to 7 is fine. That's my pre-operational stage. Animism is a term you might see because they believe their animals can talk. That's animism. Okay, so that's pre-operational. Again, imagination, they learn symbols. Not my children, of course, but probably other people's children. When you drove by and you saw the big M in the sky and the kid would get really happy because they knew that McDonald's meant a Happy Meal toy. Okay, my children too. But yes, okay. They don't know at McDonald's how to spell it. They don't know what it does. All they know is that big old M means I'm going to get a little Happy Meal. Okay, not eat the food and just play with the toy. So concrete is my next one. That is 7 to 11. So that term with the 2 glasses in their hand, that's called conservation. Conservation is the concept that those 2 things have the same amount. Prior to this, they did not know that those 2 things held the same amount. The goal is to learn that in the concrete stage. Okay? So if you see a question that says, the kid said, Mom, to cut my pieces in lots of little slices. Okay? They don't get it's the same amount that's a whole pizza. They really just think it's making sure that you cut it in those little bitty pieces. And then my formal stage, of course, that is when where we stop. We're able to think formally. We're able to do abstract thinking. Okay. An example of a question, again, that wouldn't be a typical, what stage is this? You have a 82-year-old man, and he's had a traumatic brain injury. You're interviewing him, and you give him a metaphor. You say, so people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Okay. And I ask him what it means, and he says, well, the glass will break if you throw a stone. Okay. So while he may be 83 with his TBI, he is back in the concrete stage. Okay, so you've got to know the ages, but also know what happens in the stages. Because if he can't understand the metaphors, then he is definitely not in my formal stage. When between the ages, between the 7 and 11, if you tell a kid that if you lay down with dogs, you're gonna get fleas, right? He's like, Mom, I don't want to sleep with my dog. I'll get fleas. Okay. In the formal operational stage, when they're 13, 14, and 15, they know, right? Be careful who you keep company with. You don't want to pick up nothing, right? So that's SPCF. That is that's Piaget. The word schema belongs to Piaget. Schema is how how you saw life, how you process life. That's your schema, your schematic. And those belong to Piaget. Again, so what you're looking for is development and cognitive. He talked about how our brain developed. Okay, so that's important to know about Piaget. I haven't seen Kohlberg a lot anymore on the test. Anybody can tell me, have they seen any Kohlberg questions recently? Unmute yourself or type in if you've seen Kohlberg recently.
I think I seen one on my LCW exam. This Cynthia, I'm in Memphis, Tennessee, and it was the moral.
Yeah.
It was I got that one right because I had just studied it.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Okay, so I'm not sure how many we see on there, but Kohlberg is our moral development guy. Okay, so he actually he was friends with Thank you. Sorry. I hit my mute button. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so what he said was at that level 1 that I am doing things that I'm doing it so I don't get in trouble. Okay, that's my only goal, is so I don't get in trouble. Okay, so I'm going to obey the rules. If you remember when your kids were 2 and 3 and they went to do something and turned around to see if you were looking, that's that age. Like, oh, is she looking? Naive hedonism, hedonism means pleasure. There used to be an island in the Caribbean called hedonism. That means pure pleasure. So it's naive hedonism. They'll do the right thing, but to get stars and stickers, not because it's the right thing to do, but because they want stars and stickers. Okay. And then my step 3, that is level 2. So that is where we follow the rules. We just follow the rules because of their rules. I just want to be known as the good girl. I want to be known as the bad girl. I'm going to conform because I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. Kohlberg said many people stop there, that we're just going to follow the rules so we don't get in trouble. We don't question the rules that says do this, do that. This is what I'm going to do. Now, level 3 is my post-conventional. And he said very few people actually get there. So post-conventional is you're aware of the rules. You just don't think they always apply to you. Okay. So, and I'm not going to take a stance, but for example, with mask, in my area, there are lots of people who the government is not going to tell them what to do, and they are not going to wear a mask. Okay. They believe that this is their individual right within the United States, and they have that right. Okay, so that's a post-conventional kind of person. And if we look at that step 6, the individual principles of consciousness, those are going to be people like Kevorkian. So if you're old enough to remember Kevorkian back in the day, he came up with that, to help people commit assisted suicide. He went to prison for that, right? Now there are states that you can do it. So at the time it wasn't legal, but it is definitely legal now in some states. I think of my John Lewis. Okay, John Lewis, he was gonna cross the bridge. He was gonna do what it took to stand up for rights. Okay, no matter what the law said, he was gonna do it. So those are people who just believe their higher morality, they're conscious what they believe is right is above the law. Okay. Again, you think about, I guess a few years ago, the woman in Kentucky who refused to sign the marriage license for the gay couple because her belief did not agree with the law. So that's my level 3. But Kohlberg said many people did not get there. Okay. You won't see it on the test, but just some fun information to impress your friends. Carol Gilligan was one of the first female feminists in the early 70s. And she was a protege of Kohlberg's, but came up with her own theory. She said that women didn't do this. That women were born, we were born as caregivers, and we had a natural caring that was more innate, and this was only for men, that women didn't go through this process. So impress your friends at your next, well, I guess no dinner party since COVID, but at your next, Zoom meeting, say, did you know? Okay, that's how you get. And you impress your friends. You sound really smart, and you're studying for the test. You've got someone beside you who has, ran the red light. You can say to them, wow, they must be in that post-conventional stage because they don't think they have to follow the rules. Okay? Make it part of your vocabulary. Make it part of your vernacular. Make it part of you. I usually tell my students that for the 90 days, and I do think it takes at least 8 to 12 weeks of really hard studying, you should smell like the test. Like, people walk by you and you should just these things like reek, because you've got to know this stuff. And you really, really have to know it. There's no easy way around it. You just have to know it. And I get it's overwhelming. I get it's a lot of information. But when I go see my doctor, I like the fact that license is hanging on the board up there. Okay. And if that means he had to study his butt off for 3 months, I'm okay with that because I need him to have a license. Okay. So then that was Erikson, and we did Piaget. So let's go ahead and pick up my Freud guy. Okay. So Freud is where my defense mechanisms. Did I mute myself again? Nope, I'm not muted. Okay, so I'm not muted this time. I'm not. Okay, so of course, Freud was our father, right? He was the first person that came up with any theories at all. Prior to Freud, we really did. I remember this was in Germany at the time, and we really kind of just men had the right to hospitalize their wives for like no reason whatsoever. Say she was crazy, and they would do ice baths. They did some electric ECT, lots of things because the men said their wives were crazy. So Freud came up with the idea of, oh my gosh, let's just talk to people, right? Let's just figure out what's going on with them. So he believed that almost everything was in the unconscious, including your defense mechanisms. Your defense mechanisms were there to protect you. Okay? It's called the topography, Freud's topography. And that really is a matter of just kind of looking at what he believed. So he said that everything was unconscious, and the goal of psychoanalysis or psychodynamic theory was to bring the unconscious to the conscious. Okay, subconscious is not the right word. Subconscious will never be the right word. You know what? That must have been a man that answered that. So subconscious, subconscious is not the right word. You might see that someplace, but that is not the right word for the test. That's a lay term. So what we use is preconscious. So in my unconscious, of course, that's where my id was. Okay, my id is my pleasure principle. If you haven't seen any of my videos, it's a pleasure principle. Oh, my id is my desire to eat, sleep, and procreate. I need my id. If my id wasn't there wouldn't be any babies, right? Had to have my id. So then I was born with the id. Eat, sleep, and procreate. Then my superego developed, but they were still both in my unconscious. See that? And he actually said the ego also developed at birth, later on, but didn't have a role until the superego developed. And he said all of those things were in your preconscious. In your preconscious are things that you could recall if you tried hard enough. So if you thought about maybe the first boy you had a crush on, or the first girl, your second grade teacher, what you got for Christmas when you were 6, some of those things, if you tried really, really hard, you could just get them. Okay, so Freud didn't want to do that. He just wanted to make sure that the things were the unconscious were the things that we brought up, because he said the unconscious is where that's where all of our issues come from. Okay, and then of course my ego, that is the reality principle. That's who I work with, and there are very few things that are actually in my conscious. Okay. So again, that is my id, ego, and my superego. But you'll see these things on the test as well. So let me just remind you while we're here. My thematic appreciation test, that and the Rorschach, the ink blot test, you'll see those, TAT or thematic appreciation test, and those are going to be on both tests. is how Freud brought things from the unconscious to the conscious. Okay, he said he would give you like 20 of those pictures, and he would ask you then to share a scenario. What do you think is happening? And again, that was from your unconscious, bringing it up, projecting it out, and putting it on out there. Of course, Freud said, "You poor woman, you don't know what this means. Let me tell you what it really means." Okay, so he worked with women, and he told them how stupid they were. That is not test material, so sorry. Okay, so the Rorschach and the ink blot, same thing. Okay, you'll see those also. Okay, so what you're looking for there is, again, that's my, the ink blot. Okay, and Freud again show you those. Same thing, bring the unconscious to the conscious. Okay, so let's go back and pick up his stages then. Let me close some windows. Okay, so then, OAPLG, another acronym. I've heard, this one says, old age parishioners love grapes. I've heard old ass people love gold. Orphan Annie, pretty little girl. I've heard all of those. So that's one of the acronyms that I like. So know what order they happened in. Remember, my oral and my anal stage are going to line up with Erikson's first two stages, right? Because Erikson was a little bit Freudian. So they don't really care what happens in those stages. What they want to know on the test is what happens if you get stuck in those stages, right? So what we know is that you would get fixated. So in your oral stage, if your mother did not breastfeed you long enough or pull the bottle out too soon, then you would be fixated in an oral stage. So the anal stage, of course, your sphincter muscle would be really, really tight. And then my phallic stage, of course, we would talk about, that's when masturbation occurs, or you learn how great it can be. So oral and anal phallic are the psychosexual stages. So if you see the question, which three are in the psychosexual, it's oral, anal, phallic. Okay, so remember, I'm born with my id, my pleasure principle, that's my devil. My basic instincts, and those are in my unconscious. So pleasure principle, oh, I know I sound just like Janet Jackson back in the day, right? So that is my id, my wants, my desires, eat, sleep, procreate. And the superego, of course, developed in your phallic stage, okay? And then your ego is always fighting it off. So my id says, I want. Okay, my id says, Pam, I want pizza. I love pizza. I want pizza in the morning, I want pizza at night, I want pizza all day long, Pam. Pizza, 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 feed me pizza. My superego, the morality, says, girl, you are 55 years old. You do not need any pizza. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Oh my gosh, you don't need any more pizza whatsoever. So no matter what my id says, feed me, feed me, feed me, my superego says, no, Pam, no. So it's a constant battle between my ego and my id, my superego and my id. My ego says, okay, Pam, you can have a slice of pizza and a salad. So the ego is always fighting back and forth between those two. So then if you see a question, the devil made me do it, or the person talks about it was an instinct. Okay, that's always going to be my id. Okay, so my id wants what it wants, and it's a constant battle according to Freud. My id always wants, and my superego always says no, 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 no. And then my reality is, this is the world we live in, and you got to figure it out. Okay, so born with my id, my superego, I'm born with my id. My ego develops later, but it doesn't have a goal. It doesn't have a purpose until that lovely phallic stage, right? Because in that phallic stage, I discover my private parts. I'm 3 and 5, between 3 and 5, and I'm like, yes. So birth, like I said, if you're fixated, and someone texted earlier, if you're fixated in that oral stage, you're going to be trying to put stuff in your mouth for the rest of your life. Okay, and again, so he said that people who are overweight, people who are eating too much, people who are drinking too much, smoking, they're still trying to fulfill that oral stage. That again, mama pulled the boob out too soon or the bottle out too soon, and of course it's always mom's fault. So just remember it was Freud. Okay, so then my anal stage, he said that again, mom potty trained you too soon. So your sphincter muscle, you learned how to keep it really tight, right? So people who we refer to them as anal these days, okay? So we still keep that really tight. Sometimes some stubbornness, sometimes they're really wound, okay? So that is what happened according to Freud because your mother potty trained you too soon. Okay? And again, so 3 to 6, that's my phallic stage. So that is when sex sensitivity now becomes concentrated in the genital. Masturbation becomes a new source of pleasure. Yes. So 3 to 5, that's what that happens. Of course, that's when my super ego develops. Because my super ego says, my id is like, oh yes, touch this. And my super ego says, no, you'll get hair on your palms, right? No. So then that's when it develops. And then my ego, of course, has to play a role to kind of calm down my super ego and between the fight. So Oedipus, it is with an O, but it's pronounced Oedipus. And Electra is the girl. So my Oedipus complex is that the boy is in love with his mother. And he is terrified that his father will kill him if he finds out. So then, in the Oedipus complex, what you might see is a question about a little boy who's going in for surgery, right? And they have to put the needle in his groin area, and he is screaming. According to psychoanalytic or psychodynamic theory, what is he afraid of? Okay, so the term is castration, but I've seen like the answer be like mutilation. Okay, because according to Freud, and remember those questions are going to be based in the theory, according to psychodynamic or psychoanalytic theory, what's he afraid of? He is afraid that the daddy will find out and cut off his penis. Okay, so Oedipus complex, E, the O is silent. Okay, then my little girl, of course, she has the Electra complex. So Electra is she's the only female, the only Marvel comic that I know. I took my son to see her in Disney when he was very little. So in love. She is the Marvel comic superhero. So the girl develops an Electra complex. So every time that you see on the news that the woman, they always say the woman who falls in with the older man has the Oedipus complex. It's not true. It's called the Electra complex. So call them up and say, hey, wait a minute. That's the Electra complex. Okay? That's Electra. Yes. Okay? So that's the Electra complex. The Oedipus, of course, is the boy, but the Electra complex is the girl. She is in love with her dad. Okay? And according to Freud, she's trying to repress those feelings. And that's what causes the fights between the mom and the daughter at that age. Okay, but it does get resolved according to Freud. However, it is resolved by the problem with the Oedipus complex, again, according to Freud, is that she doesn't have a penis. So that she wants to have a penis like her dad. Okay, so Oedipus, girl is in love with her dad, but she wants a penis to be like her dad. Oedipus, the boy is in love with his mother. He's afraid of castration. Okay. The latency stage, again, nothing happens in that stage according to Freud. And then my genital stage, anything on the test that has to do with actual intercourse, that's where that comes from. Okay, anything that has to do with actual intercourse is going to be in my in my my genitalia stage. Okay, so that was a little bit of Freud. So as we talk about Freud, the TAT, and of course, he believed everything was unconscious. So he believed those defense mechanisms were also unconscious. They were all unconscious except for one. Okay? They're really about 30,000. Honestly, they're not that many, but there's quite a few. But really, on the test, I'm just going to go over some of the major ones that you need to know. Okay, so let's see here. Let's pick like this one. Okay, so again, they were unconscious. We did not know that we were doing these except for one. And which one is that? Does anybody remember? That is suppression. So repression is I'm repressing it down. So the client comes in presenting with sexual difficulty. You ask her if she has been molested, and she says, I don't remember, but my sisters were. That is repression. She really, really doesn't remember. Suppression says, I remember, but I'm choosing not to deal with it. So one of the most common questions I've seen is there's an elderly person, an old man, old woman, elderly person, and they recall being abused as a kid, but they are choosing not to deal with it. So that is suppression. That was the only one that is not in my unconscious. That's a choice, according to Freud. Okay, so again, I talked about all those lovely things that are in your unconscious. Okay, your immoral urges, your motives, your fears, your unacceptable sexual desires, your shameful experiences. All those things are down there, and according to Freud, all you need is this smart man to pull them up from out of there, and you'll be a better person, right? And then your preconscious, you can get pretty easily by yourself. Your conscious thoughts are always, again, that's your day-to-day living, your perceptions, but it's just a really, really small part. For the test, psychoanalytic and psychodynamic theory are going to be used interchangeably. In the real world, so when Freud came up with his theory, it really was not meant to be long-term. It was meant to be psychoanalytic, but it was meant to be short-term. So somehow through the years, it ended up long-term. However, with the invent of HMOs and insurance, we came up with psychodynamic or a very shorter period. So now we can, there's a theory that looks at using the psyche, the unconscious, but in a much shorter period. So, but again, for the tests, they're used interchangeably on both of them, the LCSW and the MSW. There's no difference. Okay. And again, so on my LCSW, I've seen this sometimes as my primitive or my my primary defense mechanisms. That's the only place I've really seen them on is on the LCSW. Has anybody else seen them? The difference between primary and less primary? Or less primary, more mature, I think that's the better word. So in general, if you see denial is going to be one of my primary defense mechanisms. So unless the question talks about alcohol and drug use, then make sure that's the best answer. Because they're all denial, right? So if you see denial and there's other things going on, unless it's clearly a drug use issue or even my pedophiles, both of those things are things that people are very much in denial about. They don't take ownership. Then other than that, I'm going to look for a more mature or different defense mechanisms. Okay. And again, denial is that, what? It's not true. So denial is not a river, that. But I've worked with work with drug users who have, one man in particular, this was probably 20 years ago. I used to do treatment with men who had just gotten out of prison for substance-related offenses, and many of them had been in prison for quite a while, and I was probably the first female they had seen in a while. So, lucky guys, right? But he stood in front of me. He had been charged with vehicular manslaughter. He had a couple of DUIs. And he stood in front of me and he told me that he could have stopped drinking anytime he wanted to. And many of our people, our substance abusers, really believe that. So that's what denial looks like. Okay. And of course, that's where those stages of change come in with the substance abusers. So regression, of course, that's when you go back to an earlier state. An adult curled up in a fetal position you might see because she's afraid or she's threatened. Most often you're not going to see like the baby cries because, you know, a new baby comes in. They're not looking for that. Do you know what it looks like as an adult? So a man who's in a business meeting and his boss doesn't like his idea and he gets up and he slams the door and he throws the chair and he walks out. Okay, that's regression. He's a grown man. He's acting like a little boy. Okay, in the fetal position one. I've seen those questions as well. Okay. Acting out, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Sometimes there are kids who are cutting. They're doing some self-injurious behavior. Now, disassociation, we know that is a disorder, right? DID is definitely one of our DSM disorders. As a defense mechanism, it would be the same way. It would be, you know, protecting myself, protecting my body from something that's happening, very painful to my body. So to dissociate is like, you know, and what I always use is the movie Precious. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. But you know, she is when she is being violated or hurt by her mother's stepfather, it goes to the scene where, you know, she is dancing. She's beautiful and she's dancing with the man of her dreams and she's living the life that she wishes. So that's dissociative disorder. Dissociative also in my defense mechanisms. DID used to be called in multiple personality disorder. So if you're old like I am, remember all those prior DSMs. So it used to be called multiple personality disorders. Remember Sybil and all that good stuff? Okay. Compartmentalization. I'm sorry for my men in the group. I think this is kind of what happens most often with my men. So they can compartmentalize. Okay, that things happen and they like to put in a different compartment. So you fought all day and you're mad as heck, and he comes and says, "Baby, you want to make love tonight?" I'm like, what? Because we've compartmentalized. We can like put this in this box over here and this box over here, and these two boxes don't touch. So it can make sense in this part of my head, but not in this part of my head. So that really is compartmentalization. I'm kind of putting it there. I can hide it back there, and I can keep going forward. Okay, projection. We see this a lot. I always think about the movie theater, in the back of the movie theater, right? And there's this big old screen, and it's projecting out my whole stuff. Okay. So misattribution of my own undesired thoughts, feelings, or impulses onto another person who does not have thoughts, feelings, or impulses. So I'm putting my stuff out there, okay? And I feel this way, so you must feel this way also. Introjection, you might see that's the opposite, where I'm bringing those thoughts in. Reaction formation, of course, that is I'm forming a reaction totally opposite of how I'm really feeling. Okay, so this is how I really feel. He is a client goes out and he attends LGBT events and he bashes and talks, is mean to the LGBT community, and he is really in love with his roommate. So he's forming a reaction totally opposite of how he really feels. Okay. So I talked about repression already. Again, repression is those repressed memories. Displacement, I am so guilty of this. Displacement is when it's the same feeling for feeling, that the feeling I have is at the wrong person. So I am mad at, I have more than one child, and sometimes the people who are not here get on my nerves, and then the one who is here does something wrong, a little bit wrong, and I let her have it. I'm sure that I'm the only bad parent in the group because you guys are all amazing. But me, on the other hand, I have done that because she is convenient. She's an easier target, right? She's now old enough to say, "Mom, you are just displacing your feelings." So that's what happens, you know, the kid of a social worker. But so that's displacement, right? Those feelings are not at her. I'm not that mad at her. I'm mad at something else, and she's less threatening or more convenient. Okay, it doesn't have to be a person. It can be an inanimate object. So you can take that anger out on your dog, your cat, the wall, any of those things. Intellectualization is one that you might see also. So what happens is we get a diagnosis and we go to WebMD, right? Because we all have cancer on WebMD. So the problem with intellectualization is we're doing that to avoid the feelings. Okay, so most often an anorexic, okay, an anorexic who in her mind she can justify why those 3 P's are all she needs for today. Okay, so it really is dealing with emotional stressors by excessive use of abstract thinking or complex explanations to control or minimize the disturbing feelings. Instead of feeling the pain of hearing that someone has cancer, we're going to go to WebMD. We're going to go figure out what the real problem is. We're going to tell the doctor, maybe the doctor's wrong because WebMD said, right? That is intellectualization. We're trying to avoid the feelings. Okay. Rationalization, giving another interpretation to a situation in the face of changing reality. Okay. Rationalization you'll see many times in my substance abuse questions, right? So he, if she had made dinner on time, I would not have hit her. Okay, so I can rationalize that because I'm giving it an excuse. I'm not taking ownership for my behavior, but I can rationalize. Sublimation sometimes gives people some difficulty. So if you're old enough to remember, there used to be these big old album things, like these really big CDs we had, and turntable. So some of the hard rock groups in the time, a lot of that devil worship music is what it was called. They would censorship happened. So what they would do is they would put the CD out and the album out, and supposedly, if you turned it over on the other side, that you might hear some some devil worship turned over and play it backwards, right? So that was sublimation. Sublimation is when I have a feeling or I have a thought that is not appropriate for society, so I find a better way to put it out. Right? So I find a better way to make sure that I put that information out there. So if I like hitting people, then it's okay if I'm a boxer. If I'm angry at the world, I become a football player. If I am a male who's had eating issues and anorexia my whole life and I become a trainer, then suddenly it's okay. So my feelings, my thoughts are inappropriate, so I'm finding a better way to put it out there. So again, back to the so-called albums back in the day, is that's what supposedly happened, that, they couldn't put out, the devil music out there because it was, definitely mothers didn't like that. But if you flipped it over on the other side and played it backwards, that's what they said. Okay. Compensation, you're weak in one area and you overemphasize it in the other area. A client who was once an excellent runner can no longer run, so he is now, the best skier ever. So he's compensating for something that he's missing. Again, suppression, we talked about that. Dealing with the stress by intentionally avoiding it, remember? So it's different than repression, because suppression, I'm aware of it, but I'm not dealing with it. Idolization. Okay, so that's when we think, we think that someone, Beyonce, I'm sure she's never had to do anything like this, like someone famous many times. We exaggerate those positive qualities. If I were her, I wouldn't have to do this, right? So that ideal view we have of that person. Splitting, that always, if you see that one, that always goes with my borderlines. Again, very black, very white. Okay, so they will split. That's a defense mechanism as well. Okay, those are my biggies. Okay, so I'm going to pull up some questions shortly, but while I do that, does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask?
Dr. Pam, I have a question. So you said that suppression is the only defense mechanism that is unconscious, right?
That is conscious.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, conscious. What about anorexia?
So anorexia, okay, I think you're talking like maybe ego dystonic, ego syntonic. Is that what you're talking about maybe?
Yeah, anorexia is ego dystonic. Yeah,
ego dystonic. So yes, so anorexia is not a defense mechanism, but the intellectualization that goes along with it, okay, is that.
Okay.
Okay,
thank you.
No problem. And I will put those slides in the box. I'm very sorry, I should have put those in there before. Thanks for asking that.
Dr. Pam, I'm
yes.
sorry, quick. Could you explain the difference between introjection and internalization?
No. So they're not going to ask you that on the test. Okay, so either one of those would be the same thing. So whether I take it in, so projection is what my feelings out. Introjection is I'm taking them in. Okay, so which is the same as internalizing. So yes, so they're not going to split hairs like that with you. Does that make sense? They really wouldn't do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, It's they're not trying. They're trying to. And I realize you think they're trying to make it sound very tricky, but it really is not. The goal is just to kind of see like what you, to see if you know the basics. They're not going to split hairs like that.
I just wanted to add something. I've taken the tests before, and just like what you were saying, there always is something about Piaget on there, Erikson and Freud. There always is. At least one question. I'd say 1 to 2. That's what I've seen.
And I'm going to say there's probably more than that. We just don't always recognize them. So if it's not like right there in our face, if it didn't say Piaget or Erikson, sometimes we really just don't recognize them that they're there.
Right. The ones I saw, they didn't say names, but I knew what they were. But
that's exactly.
Like you said, there were probably others too.
So I tutor to all the tests, all the mental health tests, and so this is kind of the basis of what we do. So they're always going to make sure there are some questions on there to make sure that you understand the history of where this came from, right? And most of us learned Freud, back in that intro to psychology back in high school, right?
Right.
So yeah. Okay. So, and again, they're not looking that, do you remember, necessarily the stages and the ages? They're looking at, do you know what that looks like with a client now? Okay. So given this situation, do you know what that would look like? Okay. I'm going to pull up some questions. Other questions, guys? Okay.
I have a quick question. For 2 things I saw doing some questions: altruism as well as cognitive dissonance. If you can clarify that for me.
I sure can. So in general, my cognitive dissonance is when I have 2 thoughts that don't line up. Okay. It is not a defense mechanism. That's just one of the terms. Okay, so people come to therapy because they don't like cognitive dissonance. They don't like when those thoughts don't match up. Okay, so the kind of the COVID has created such a cognitive dissonance for people, right? We've had this belief all along that, especially in the beginning, it was just the Chinese over there, right? It was just them, and it seemed surreal when it came to our country, and then people died in our country, and we're like, but wait a minute, this can't be real. We can't be stuck in our house, right? Our anxiety levels have gone up. That's because I've had this belief, this thought that I've already had, and now new information has come in, and it's questioning my current process, and I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. So dissonance is just that there's 2 things going on, and it's uncomfortable in my thought patterns. Okay. So then the cognitive dissonance again. So he believes smoking's wrong. He does, because he's hiding it from his kids. Okay. But he's still smoking. So in order to reduce that cognitive dissonance, I'm going to then come up with a plan. So that's why people come to therapy many times, is to relieve some of that anxiety. Okay. Altruism is when I do something without any benefit for me. I just do it because it's good for society. It's good for other people. There's nothing in it for me. There's an episode of Friends a long, long time ago where, I don't know, one of the characters is charged with doing some altruism. And every time she goes to do something, someone does something, she benefits from it. So she can't do anything without benefiting from it. So, okay. So again, these are not.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. So these are not typical test questions. These are just more of making sure that you understand some of the basic concepts. So you can really go back and answer those questions. Okay. So then let's start with, okay, in number 7. Okay. In terms of Kohlberg's theory of moral reasoning, which of the level contains I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine? Where would that be? You can type in the chat box. Since we just talked about altruism, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. Is that altruism? It is not. It is not, right? That is actually pre-conventional. That's C. I'm only going to do it if you do something for me. Okay, if there's not anything in it for me, there's no need for me to do it. So that is what, little kids, remember, they haven't developed that desire just to do the right thing yet. At this point, it's making sure that it is C. It is C. Perfect. Okay. So look at number 8.
Can you make it bigger?
I can. Oh, it's probably not gonna work. What that? That's your old lady font, as my kids would call it. Okay, that might not work there. So according to Kohlberg, stages of moral reasoning, those in the post-conventional stage, post-conventional, C. They know the law. They know the law. Okay. So is it B or C? They have a healthy respect, but are guided more by morality, or they disregard the law in light of morality. It is B. It is B. They're aware of the law. They are aware of the law. However, Jack Kevorkian knew he was going to go to prison. He knew exactly what would happen if he continued to do this, and he wasn't ignoring it. He just felt that his morality was much more important. Okay. This is an interesting question. This is an Erikson question. Look at number 10. A is not correct. That's not very Erikson-y. So you got to figure out how old she is and what stage would she be in according to Erikson. She's 3. So she's 3. So she's either in that end of that initiative versus guilt stage, or maybe she's starting that either she's finishing up autonomy versus shame and doubt, or she's beginning the initiative stage, right? So she is 3. Okay. And you are correct. That is D. Yes. Because I don't want her to, she's starting her initiative, right? Some autonomy, and I want to allow her to do that. Okay, bless you. But I cannot let her lose her toes. Okay, they're calling defects on me if I let her lose her toes. So that can't be it. So it's got to be D. Good job. Okay, that's what it looks like. Does it say Erikson anywhere? Okay, all I know is that she's 3, and these are things going on. In terms of psychosocial development, that was the key there, looking for Erikson. Okay, go back to the question, because it matters what Erikson said. That's what the theorists look like in the test. What did Erikson say? Okay. Look at number 11. Again, know her age. What happens in this age? Three to five. So that should be initiative versus guilt. Yes, that's Erikson. Initiative versus guilt. Okay. Her mother asked her a question about sex and she like totally blows her off. So she's going to feel guilty according to Erikson. Okay. So that's what it's going to look like. And it might not even say Erikson. It would just get psychosocial development. So you've got to know what stages those are in. Okay. Number 12. Look at this one. So she's seeing you to adjust to retirement. You know, she always wanted to be a teacher. Worked all her life in the family business. If given her stage of psychosocial development, your best approach is she's 68. What stage is she in? That's the last stage, right? Ego integrity versus despair. So I'm going to acknowledge her despair. Perfect. Okay. So again, you're looking for the psychosocial development. That's what it means. Okay. Hope that helps out when you kind of have knowing it, what it looks like in the question. Okay. So that was little my Erikson. So then let's go down to, okay, let's see here. We go back. Maslow, remember if you see Maslow, those bottom needs are called my D needs. Those are called deficits. So the top of the chart, that's, you know, as it goes up. So it's a theory, it's a humanistic approach. But again, they're called the deficits that you have. Those are called your D needs. Okay. Look at number 37. A little Freudian there. He's described as anal retentive. His mama potty trained him too soon. His sphincter muscle is still tight, right? Oh, so tight. Exactly. He's stuck in that stage. Oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital. Okay. 38. According to Freud, the following words are sequentially analogous to these words. Id, ego, superego. So which of the set would match? In the same order. Got my id is my pleasure principle. I want it and it feels good, right? Okay. So then, is it a need or an impulse?
Impulsive.
Yeah. And then my ego? My ego is not my desire, so it can't be A. Is my ego my desire? Ah, so B, need, reason, and conscious. Much better choice, right? Okay.
Hey, can you kind of explain that a little more in detail, please, Pam?
I can. Okay, because Freud said that if we don't procreate, there won't be any more of us, right? If we don't eat, sleep, and procreate, we don't have a choice. That's a need. He said that we were innately born with that. Okay, so my ego is then going to be he's going to be the middle guy, right? He's trying to rational things out. My superego is my conscious. So my id, again, my id wants pizza. My id wants pizza. Oh my gosh, Pam, you know what? They still deliver. You could get a whole pizza. If you got the thin crust, it'd be okay because you could eat the whole thing. And if you got spinach, you wouldn't feel so bad, right? Pam, eat pizza. Call them now. Eat pizza, pizza, pizza. They know you, Pam. They'll be here in a few minutes. Okay? My superego is like, Pam, oh my gosh, go eat a salad, girlfriend. Stop. That's my conscious. I know better. You know what? My trainer's coming over. I got to work out tomorrow. He's going to put me on the scale. Pam, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. And then the reason, the rationale in the middle is like, you know what? You've got to eat dinner, Pam. So again, why don't you have just a little bit of pizza and maybe some salad? Okay. So all three of them had to match, and my id can be my impulses. Okay, but my ego is not my desire. My ego is the middle guy who's just trying to keep us safe. When I talk about ego syntonic and ego dystonic, things that are comfortable with my ego or uncomfortable with my ego, that's what I'm talking about. That is the Freudian term, my ego, who I am. Did that help?
Yes, that helped. Thank you, Pam.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. So all you need to do is hear the pleasure principle. Oh, when you take the test. That's all that matters. So just hear that song in your head. Okay, I want to go down and pick up some of my defense mechanisms here. Oh, let's go there.
I'm on the phone.
We know you're on the phone. We hear it. Look at 54. Look at Buddy. Buddy says, I do it. I do it. He's 3. What stage is he in? He is initiative. That's the time kids want to help. It's the only time in life they don't mind doing things. They think it's so much fun to help you wash the dishes. Got it, got it, got it. Look at 57. Look at Michelle. She's 50, but she's stuck. Oh, she can't be initiative versus guilt because that's 3 to 5. She's not stuck there. Exactly. Intimacy versus isolation. She spent so much time. She's single and very frustrated that she's never been married. So she's in the generativity stage, but the crisis is that she never finished that intimacy stage. Okay? I'm going to pick up a few of my defense mechanisms and we'll call it a night. So give me just a little bit. They're here somewhere. Okay, so let's look at, well, let's start here, okay? Look at 182.